If somebody has a ledger as an institutional investor, but you have three investment managers or three managing directors, what do you do with the ledger at night, right? So do you give it to somebody and then this person takes it home? Then you have the risk that that person doesn't appear the next day in the office. Do you leave it in the office with markets being so volatile? So I think when we started, like the key thing for us was giving institutional investors access, but at the same time having the security of hardware wallets.
As the co-founder of Finoa, could you provide an overview of the specific services Finoa offers?
We're very happy to do so. So we started in 2019 as a crypto custodian, how you call these players nowadays. But by now have evolved into more comprehensive platforms, so beyond custody, offering staking, trading, so liquidity services for the customer, as well as several DeFi interactions, so decentralized governance, decentralized lending, etc., etc.
And what about advising institutional investors and companies to just get themselves a hardware wallet, buy crypto, and hodl?
Depends, I would say. But I mean, the institutional investors which we serve, they are mostly VC funds, family offices, smaller independent asset managers, right? And with a hardware wallet, you're missing a lot of the governance and security standards you have when being served by a third-party custodian. I mean, I give you one example. If somebody has a ledger as an institutional investor, but you have three investment managers or three managing directors, what do you do with the ledger at night, right? So do you give it to somebody and then this person takes it home? Then you have the risk that that person doesn't appear the next day in the office. Do you leave it in the office with markets being so volatile? So I think when we started, like the key thing for us was giving institutional investors access, but at the same time having the security of hardware wallets. And we also, as part of our security mechanisms, we use hardware security modules, which basically have the same functions like hardware wallets, like the hardware wallets we know as retail customers. But we built the whole governance, the whole approval policies, the whole security infrastructure on top. So we try to combine the best out of two worlds. Yeah.
So could one say that with companies and institutions, multi-sig is the way to go?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, also it's like required from a regulatory perspective, right? So if we talk about identity access management, that also refers to institutional investors. So for sure it's multi-sig, which we see all over the globe.
And can you elaborate on the unique challenges that institutional investors and companies face when venturing into cryptocurrency investments?
I think like there's two main challenges which are both being solved as we speak, right? On the one hand side, you always had that the technological infrastructure, and we have to be honest there, is not comparable to what institutions face in the traditional financial world, right? So the industry is a decade plus a couple of years old, so on the whole infrastructure side, a lot of the things have to build and had to build to enable institutional investors to have like a good experience which they are somehow used to from the traditional financial world. The second one obviously is the regulatory part. So in a lot of jurisdictions, and I mean especially the US but also Europe, for quite a long time it was not certain what a cryptocurrency is, what type of services you are allowed to use as an investor, right, as an asset manager, family office. And I think what we have been seeing over the last 3-4 years, that really has improved. We have made big steps as an industry, also with the regulators, and I think you see that also with more and more institutions getting into the space, that the infrastructure piece is picking up, the regulatory piece is picking up. Are we where we need to be? No, there's still a lot of work. But again, like the industry is still very young, as I always like to say.
Yeah. And are there any advantages for institutional investors and companies operating in Europe?
I think we, like compared to the US, and I always make that reference, like we as a company, but also investors in Europe, we know what we are allowed to do and what we're not allowed to do, right? So Germany was very progressive in putting the regulatory framework into place. What is crypto custody? What are crypto assets, etc., etc. And it obviously slowed down innovation a bit. But for us as a regulated company, since January 2020, we know what we are allowed to do, we know what we're not allowed to do, we know which licenses we require, etc., etc. So it's known. In the US, it was a little bit like Wild West, right? There were no clear rules. People were allowed to do a lot of things, but in the end, SEC said, okay, that was illegal business, and now they're being all sued. So, like, while Europe always has been a bit slower, we had a framework into place which enabled us to know what we are allowed to do, and not being sued, which is right now happening in the US. What's better of the both of them? I think you can argue, right? But for us, it helped a lot to just have like that clarity and that clearance of knowing what is allowed and what is not allowed.
Absolutely, yeah. And what are your experiences so far with German authorities? Any difficulties? Any special challenges?
I mean, of course, it's not easy because, like, as I also said before, it's two completely different ecosystems, right? You have the traditional financial system, you have the crypto ecosystem. The laws from the traditional financial system, like the Banking Act, it's not one-to-one. You can't one-to-one copy it and then say, okay, crypto also fits in there, like in terms of AML, ownership of funds, etc., etc. There's so many differences between crypto and what you see in the traditional financial world that regulators have a very, very difficult job to catch up. And that's also why for us being a regulated company, we have to explain them what we do. The good thing is, like, the German regulator, they are listening, they are trying to understand it, and they are progressive. So they are not saying no. But yes, it's like it's a journey, because obviously, like, they have to build up the competence, they have to build up the capabilities, and crypto is just too different from what we have been seeing in the traditional world that you can merge that into one financial system.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.